Let's talk about when Django isn't the right tool for the job, and specifically when supplementing Django with a queue is the right way to go. As a quick reminder, Django is fundamentally about the HTTP request and response, right? A user is going to send a request, and Django, wherever it is, however it's running, is going to return a response. One of the things that we haven't talked about, however, is what happens when we issue a request and then don't issue a response. Right? What's going to happen is, depending on your browser, whatever system you're using, after a certain amount of time, the user is going to be greeted by an error. So we really don't want to do this, but you might say to yourself, well, why in the world would I not return a response? Where would I program Django to not do that? So let's talk about an actual example. Let's say that the user wants to upload an image, and we want to process that image once it reaches our servers. The catch is that the processing of the image is going to take longer than the timeout that the user has on their system, right? The browser is going to time out after 30 seconds or 60 seconds. And for the sake of this example, let's simply pretend that whatever processing we're doing on that image is going to take a few minutes. Now, we need to return a response before we're done processing the image. But Django only handles code within that HTTP loop, right? If we return the response, then we have no ability to get Django to do anything else, including process an image. Well, this isn't a real problem, right? We're just going to add a separate process, and when the image shows up on our servers, we're going to just give the image to that process, and Django can go back to doing what it always does and just return a response. Right? So that's sort of the general idea here. We're supplementing Django's behavior where we're saying, oh, well, Django doesn't have the ability to handle this processing, so we're going to have something else doing. The secret here, of course, is that we've been supplementing Django the entire time. That's right. When we needed long-term memory, well, we supplemented Django with a database. When we needed short-term memory to ensure that the connection between the database and Django was it wasn't speedy enough, so we needed short-term memory, we introduced a cache. And similarly, now that we have long-term processing that is going to take longer than the HTTP request response loop, we're introducing a queue. Now, the queue is fairly simple. Once we receive an image from a user, we're just going to add it onto a list. And we're going to have a process that is going to take any of the items in this first in, first out list, pull it off of that queue, and process it in whatever way is necessary. Now, once it's done processing it, it can do whatever it might normally do, right? It can go ahead and update the database, change the cache, or even issue an HTTP request to Django. And of course, if we need to process this data more quickly, we can just add more workers as long as there's sort of a single queue that they can all pull from, and as long as the queue supports that type of concurrency. So that's it. That's really the secret here, is that we've been supplementing Django with a whole host of other tools to help with behavior that Django doesn't support, and we're simply going to do it again. And this time, we're going to be doing it with Celery running on a Redis queue.